Welcome. Today we are strapping in to examine a film that wasn't just a hit, it was more like a cultural singularity.
Right.
It really defined the techno-dystopian future for generations. I'm talking, of course, about James Cameron's 1984 classic, The Terminator.
It's such a critical piece of cinema to dissect.
It is. And our mission here isn't to just rewatch the plot.
No.
We want to do a full analysis of the history, the casting, which was so improbable, the technical innovations, and, the enduring legacy of this machine dream that just burst out of a low-budget horror scene.
And the film's influence, it just far outstripped its origins. I mean, this was a true sleeper hit.
Absolutely.
Directed by James Cameron, co-written by him and Gail Ann Hurd, and it was the vehicle that truly launched the careers of Arnold Schwarzenegger, Michael Biehn, and Linda Hamilton.
And it did all that with, what, minimal initial studio faith?
Almost none. It really achieved global resonance on its own terms.
And while we're going to bypass the minute-to-minute action, we do have to establish the stakes.
The stakes are everything.
They're chilling. And they're what made the film so visceral. The core premise is just terrifying in its efficiency. A cybernetic assassin, the T-800, is sent from a desolate future, 2029.
A world dominated by the hostile AI, Skynet.
And it's sent back to 1984 with just a single purpose: eradication.
To kill Sarah Connor, who is, at this point, a seemingly ordinary waitress. But her unborn son, John, is destined to one day lead the human resistance against the machines.
The film immediately shows you the cold brutality of this antagonist.
Oh, right away. The machine isn't driven by malice or, any kind of emotion.
Yeah.
It's driven by a database and pure unfeeling logic. We see it so early on as the Terminator just systematically searches through a phone book.
The phone book, right.
And dispatches multiple women who just share the name Sarah Connor.
And crucially, we see the tragic cost of this. The collateral damage.
That's when it hits home. When it intercepts Sarah's roommate Ginger and Ginger's boyfriend Matt.
They're just in the way.
They're just in the way. They're brutally, indiscriminately eliminated because they're an obstacle to the mission. The sheer peril Sarah faces is just underlined by this realization that this force is unstoppable, it's devoid of empathy, and it treats human life as just an obstacle.
The human element is in just desperate jeopardy.
Completely.
Protected only by Kyle Reese, a single soldier sent back to save her. It's the perfect distillation of dread.
And what makes this story even more compelling is the commercial reality behind it.
Okay, let's talk about the numbers. It came out October 26, 1984, on a budget of just $6.4 million.
That is tiny, even for the time, especially when you consider the complex effects work involved.
And yet, it just utterly defied all the low pre-release expectations from the distributor.
It did. It eventually grossed $78.3 million worldwide. That level of return on investment for a gritty, genre-blending sci-fi horror film.
It changed everything.
It fundamentally and immediately changed how Hollywood viewed James Cameron, and it elevated Schwarzenegger from a niche action star to a global icon.
So that's what we're going to do today. We're going to trace that unlikely journey.
From the fever dream to the big screen.
Exactly. Charting the film's conception, the production hurdles, the casting paradoxes, and really analyze why its dialogue around AI and genre still defines pop culture today.
Okay, let's get into it.
Let's unpack the literal origin of the machine. The history of the Terminator.
Yeah.
It doesn't begin in a structured writer's room or some big studio meeting.
No, not at all.
It starts in a state of illness, in a haze of fever, half a world away from Hollywood.
That's a wonderful way to put it, because it's true. James Cameron was in Rome, Italy, during the 1982 release of his first directorial effort.
The largely forgotten Piranha II.
The Spawning.
A very troubled production.
Yeah.
And while he was there, he got sick with a fever, and he had this incredibly vivid and terrifying dream.
And the image that stuck with him, that became the entire premise.
It was a metallic torso. This torso was dragging itself away from an explosion. But here's the detail, the one that bridges sci-fi and horror. It was holding kitchen knives. A metallic torso with kitchen knives. That image, it immediately pulls the concept away from, say, traditional space operas or sleek futuristic stories.
Oh, completely. It grounds it firmly in the horror genre, specifically the slasher category.
Cameron himself said that, right?
He did. He acknowledged he used this visceral, horrifying dream as a launching pad to write what was essentially a slasher-style horror film. His goal was low-budget efficiency.
Like John Carpenter.
Drawing direct inspiration from directors like John Carpenter, who had this massive, profitable success with Halloween in 1978. Cameron knew the key was to have a relentless, unstoppable force chasing a final girl.
But in a science fiction context?
Precisely.
It wasn't just slasher movies, though. His influences show a real a cross-pollination of genres.
Absolutely. He was clearly steeped in classic speculative fiction. You can see elements from 1950s science fiction cinema and the chilling premises of the 1960s TV series The Outer Limits.
And then there's the more contemporary stuff.
Right. He also incorporated the minimalist, high-impact style of contemporary action films. He cited specific movies, like Walter Hill's neo-noir The Driver from '78 and George Miller's incredibly kinetic sequel Mad Max 2 from '81.
So it's a fusion, a pursuit narrative with sci-fi stakes, all filtered through a noir aesthetic.
That's a perfect description.
So once he had that core concept, the scripting process began.
It did. Largely written by Cameron himself, but with some crucial assistance. He wrote the draft while staying in Pomona, California, at the home of sci-fi writer Randall Frakes.
And it wasn't an easy process, I understand.
Not entirely. He actually had to fire his initial agent because the agent just disliked the early horror-centric concept.
Too dark.
Too dark, maybe too lowbrow, who knows. To ground the dialogue, Cameron then enlisted his friend Bill Wisher, who had a similar understanding of, street talk and police procedure.
Wisher wrote the police station scene.
He wrote scenes specifically involving Sarah Connor and the police detectives. He ultimately got an additional dialogue credit for that contribution.
What's fascinating to me is the evidence that the franchise's future, the technology, was already being imagined in this first low-budget outline.
This really shows Cameron's incredible forward thinking. The initial script draft involved 2 Terminators being sent back.
2 of them.
One was the T-800 model we know, the metal endoskeleton covered in living tissue. The second, more advanced unit was designed to be made of liquid metal.
So it could reform itself,
Yeah.
making it basically impossible to destroy with normal weapons.
Exactly.
That's the T-1000, years before CGI made that possible.
That's right. Cameron immediately shelved the liquid metal idea. He just recognized that the special effects technology of 1984, stop motion and practical puppetry, was just insufficient to realize the concept convincingly.
Unaffordably.
And affordably. He waited 7 years to use that concept for the iconic T-1000 in Terminator 2. It just highlights his deep technical awareness. He prioritized practical, achievable horror for the first film and saved the advanced concepts for when the technology and his budget could support them.
Which brings us to one of the most famous and maybe regrettable business decisions in cinema history.
The $1 deal.
The $1 deal.
Gail Ann Hurd, a former assistant to the legendary low-budget producer Roger Corman, showed intense interest. And Cameron, who was desperate to direct but held basically no leverage after the Piranha the Second fiasco, made this radical choice.
He sold the entire rights to the project to Hurd for just $1.
$1. The condition, though, was non-negotiable. She could produce it only if he were allowed to direct.
A massive sacrifice for creative control. It paid off artistically, but...
Oh, it certainly cost him financially in the long run. He later admitted his regret over selling the rights for such a minimal sum, especially given the billion-dollar franchise it spawned.
And the credit structure is interesting there, too.
It is. Hurd received a screenwriting credit, even though Cameron later clarified she did no actual writing at all, suggesting the credit was part of the overall ownership and financing agreement. This deal was the foundation that allowed them to secure financing.
So how did they take this $1 concept and turn it into a $6.4 million film? Especially when Orion Pictures, the distributor, was so hesitant.
Orion agreed to distribute, but they insisted Cameron and Hurd find external financial backing.
They had to bring in their own money.
Right. And that crucial support came from John Daly, the chairman of Hemdale Film Corporation, and his executive vice president, Derek Gibson. They became the executive producers and were instrumental in setting up the financing, essentially stitching together that low budget.
And there's a specific high-stakes anecdote about how Cameron finalized the pitch. It's just pure Hollywood legend.
It's the ultimate act of creative commitment. Cameron knew he had to impress the financiers, so he had his friend, the actor Lance Henriksen, show up early to the pitch meeting.
And Henriksen was later cast as Detective Vukovich.
He was. But for this meeting, Cameron instructed him to fully embody the character of the Terminator.
So what did that performance entail?
He arrived wearing a tattered leather jacket. He had applied fake cuts to his face, and he had gold foil on his teeth to simulate the metal skull underneath.
Wow.
He didn't just walk in. He kicked open the office door, startling the Hemdale executives, and then he just sat down, intensely glaring at everyone. Cameron arrived a little later and had to calmly explain to the terrified staff that Henriksen was just acting out a scene.
I can't imagine.
Daly and Gibson were completely won over, not just by the screenplay and Cameron's sketches, but by the sheer unbridled passion and conviction of the creative team. That immediate, visceral understanding of the project secured the financing from Hemdale and HBO in late 1982.
The conviction of that pitch really set the stage for the rest of the film.
That creation myth is fascinating, but a film this influential needed actors who could sell that myth. And the casting process for the T-800 is a perfect example of accidental alchemy.
Accidental alchemy, I like that. It resulted in a star who was almost the exact opposite of what Cameron initially wanted.
It really was a series of fortunate rejections that led to greatness. Orion Pictures, the distributor, they initially wanted Arnold Schwarzenegger for the role of the hero.
Kyle Reese.
For Kyle Reese, because his American popularity and his foreign box office appeal were both increasing.
So Cameron, ironically, he felt he needed someone more famous for the Terminator role.
That's right. And the list of names who passed is remarkable. Sylvester Stallone and Mel Gibson both turned down the villain role.
And then there's the detail that sounds so different in hindsight.
The studio suggested O.J. Simpson for the Terminator. Cameron, quite rightly, didn't find him believable as a killer at that time. He felt he had too gentle a public image to embody this cold, calculating machine.
So if Cameron didn't want Schwarzenegger for Reese, and he certainly didn't think he fit the villain, how did the actual casting happen?
Cameron's initial plan was a pure gambit. He agreed to meet with Schwarzenegger, but his intention was to engineer an argument. Basically, yeah. To declare Schwarzenegger unsuitable for Reese and then go back to the studio with a "we tried" attitude. He wanted to avoid casting him altogether.
That is a high-risk way to handle a studio mandate. What changed his mind?
The meeting was transformative. Cameron was genuinely impressed by Schwarzenegger's intelligence, his grasp of the script, and specifically his suggestions on how the villain should be played.
Not as a traditional monster.
But as a machine. Cameron found himself just sketching Schwarzenegger's face on a notepad throughout their discussion. After the meeting, Cameron immediately told the producer, John Daly, Arnold won't play Reese, but he'd make a hell of a Terminator.
But despite Cameron's sudden shift, Arnold himself was reportedly not sold on the project at first.
Not at all. His commitment level mirrored his skepticism. While he was filming Conan the Destroyer, which was the cause of that massive production delay, an interviewer asked him about a pair of shoes from the Terminator's wardrobe.
And what did he say?
He just dismissed it entirely. He said, "Oh, some shit movie I'm doing. Take a couple weeks."
That is a far cry from recognizing a career-defining role.
He admitted later he just saw it as another B-action movie. His perspective completely changed only when he saw 20 minutes of the first edit.
And he realized what they had.
He recalled thinking, this is really intense, this is wild, I don't think I've ever seen anything like this before. He realized then, he said, this could be bigger than we all think.
And to prepare for the part, his training was meticulous.
It was. He spent 3 months training with weapons experts, learning to reload and fire without blinking, without showing any human hesitation. That training was so crucial because it allowed the mechanical nature of the T-800 to be conveyed purely through physical discipline.
The casting decision, though brilliant, does raise that central paradox, doesn't it? The idea of an infiltration unit.
Right.
You just wouldn't choose the most recognizable bodybuilder on the planet to sneak into a crowd.
Cameron reflected on this exact irony. He conceded that casting Schwarzenegger shouldn't have worked, logically. If the character is meant to be a subtle infiltration unit, there's no way you wouldn't spot a Terminator in a crowd instantly if they all look like Arnold.
So how did the film get away with that logistical flaw?
Cameron wisely concluded that the beauty of movies is that they don't have to be logical. They just have to have plausibility. The sheer cinematic presentation, the relentless pace, Arnold's performance, it all made the audience accept the conceit.
And the minimalist dialogue helped.
Hugely. Schwarzenegger speaks only 17 lines in the whole film, fewer than 100 words. Cameron felt that even his distinct Austrian accent worked in the film's favor, giving him a strange synthesized quality, like they hadn't gotten the voice programming quite worked out yet.
The mechanical perfection of the T-800 really demands a deeply human counterbalance.
It does.
Moving to the hero, Kyle Reese. Securing the right actor proved difficult, especially because Cameron was still an unknown quantity.
It was a challenging search. The rock musician Sting was a target for the role. He was offered a substantial $350,000.
A huge sum for that budget.
It was. But he declined, stating Cameron was too unknown a director to risk his reputation on. They ultimately settled on Michael Biehn.
And Biehn initially had his own reservations, I believe. He found the material a bit silly.
He did. Biehn had his sights set on working with more established directors and confessed he initially found the script for the Terminator silly on paper. His opinion flipped entirely after he met Cameron.
What did the producers see in him?
Producer Gail Ann Hurd noted that Biehn was uniquely successful in conveying the human connection needed for that rushed, intense love story with Sarah Connor. Many other actors who auditioned came across as too tough, too purely military. They wouldn't have sold the vulnerability.
And Bihn's preparation was pretty intense.
It was. He specifically studied the Polish resistance movement in World War II to understand the mindset of a soldier constantly operating underground, sleep-deprived, and desperately fighting a vastly superior force.
And finally, Sarah Connor. Linda Hamilton's casting was so vital because the audience needed to see a transformation, not a pre-existing hero.
The script nailed the description, which was crucial for casting. Sarah was described as 19 small and delicate features, pretty in a flawed, accessible way. Her vulnerable quality masks a strength even she doesn't know exists.
And Linda Hamilton had just finished filming Children of the Corn.
She had, and she fit this description perfectly. Interestingly, Rosanna Arquette and Leah Thompson also auditioned, but Hamilton had that inherent mixture of vulnerability and, that nascent strength.
So it's clear that the final iconic trio was the result of a director's persistence, accidental chemistry, and the unexpected benefit of casting actors who were maybe less expensive than the big stars.
But who possessed the perfect underlying qualities for their roles. The entire production schedule faced this massive, almost crippling obstacle before a single primary scene was even filmed.
A 9-month delay.
Right. It should have killed the movie outright.
That is nearly a year of momentum loss for a low-budget project. What caused that massive halt?
It was purely contractual. Arnold Schwarzenegger was obligated to Dino De Laurentiis for Conan the Destroyer. De Laurentiis exercised an option clause that made Schwarzenegger completely unavailable for almost a year.
So the initial plan to start filming in Toronto in early '83 had to be completely abandoned.
Completely.
But looking back, that 9-month gap proved to be, well, perhaps the most fortunate setback in cinematic history, didn't it?
It was a monumental gift of time.
It gave Cameron the time he needed to basically architect the next decade of blockbuster cinema.
Absolutely. Instead of waiting idly, Cameron was contracted to write the script for Rambo. First Blood Part 2, which earned him significant money and further bolstered his reputation. And crucially, he also used that time to meet with producers David Girdler and Walter Hill to begin developing the sequel to Alien.
Which became Aliens, released in 1986.
Exactly. The delay not only let him refine the Terminator script, but it also provided the foundation for 2 other major action franchises. It cemented his status as a triple threat writer, producer, and director before the Terminator even premiered.
So while Cameron was busy launching multiple careers at once, the studio, Orion, they kept their involvement pretty limited. Did they try to fundamentally change the story?
Interference was minimal, but there were suggestions. Orion, apparently wary of the human protector being alone, suggested adding a canine android for Reese to have as a helper.
A robot dog.
A robot dog! Cameron flat out refused that idea, wanting to maintain the gritty realism of Reese's desperation.
But he did accept one suggestion.
He did. He accepted the suggestion to strengthen the love interest and character development between Sarah and Reese. And that acceptance was pivotal. It ensured the film had a beating human heart amidst all the mechanical violence.
Let's talk about the physical production, because the film's impact relied entirely on its low-budget special effects mastery and its gritty, practical noir look.
Filming was a grueling experience. It took place primarily at night on location in Los Angeles, which required extraordinarily tight schedules to maximize that limited budget.
And there was a major challenge involving Linda Hamilton.
There was. Just a week before filming started, she suffered a significant injury. She sprained her ankle.
That's not an easy fix.
No, it forced production changes, pushing her critical running and action scenes to the very end of the shoot. She spent the majority of the time in pain, having her ankle taped daily just to get through her scenes. You could argue this physical pain actually contributed to the character's exhausted, stressed appearance.
It added some unintended realism.
It did.
The practical effects, especially that T-800 endoskeleton, they remain iconic. They hold up remarkably well, which is a testament to the genius of Stan Winston.
Stan Winston was the absolute master of practical monster creation. He led the team responsible for building the T-800 puppet. The collaboration between Cameron and Winston was intense. They passed sketches back and forth until they landed on a design almost identical to Cameron's original dream drawing.
And his small team of artists worked for months on it.
A small team of 7 artists worked for 6 months to create the full puppet.
Can you elaborate on the materials, the process?
It was meticulous. It was first sculpted in clay, then cast in plaster. This required reinforcing the internal structure with steel ribbing for articulation. The final metallic effect, that striking silver look, was achieved through chrome plating the exterior.
And they made multiple versions of Schwarzenegger's face, too.
Yes, they sculpted reproductions in silicone and plaster to accurately depict the T-800's various stages of damage, from the missing eye to the full reveal of the skull under the torn skin.
What about the future war sequences? Those used technology that was already getting a bit outdated, yet they felt seamless.
The sequences set in 2029, with the animated endoskeletons and hunter-killers, relied on stop-motion animation.
Done by Gene Warren Jr.'s company, Fantasy II.
Right. And the budget demanded resourceful solutions. Here's where the specific insight comes in. Cameron knew that the often jerky, unnatural movement inherent to stop motion would pull the audience out of the film unless it was justified narratively.
That's why the scene of Schwarzenegger limping was so crucial.
Exactly. It was a stroke of low-budget genius. A brief scene was filmed of Schwarzenegger limping away while injured at the end of the film. This gave the stop-motion animators a reference point, allowing them to make the model endoskeleton realistically imitate that specific impaired movement.
So the limp justified the animation's movement.
It did. It elevated the effect from just budget animation to subtle realism.
Beyond the skeleton, the signature weapon of the Terminator is almost a character in itself, that massive futuristic handgun.
That is the AMT long slide pistol, modified for the film by effects expert Ed Reynolds. The major modification was adding a hefty optical sight which contained a laser.
And here lies a fascinating technical constraint of 1984.
It does. Affordable, powerful diode lasers did not yet exist. They had to use a helium neon laser, which required a rather large external power supply. Schwarzenegger had to activate the laser manually before each take.
And the effects expert who did that ingenious modification?
Ed Reynolds. He later stated his only compensation was promotional material for the film. It just highlights the tight budget.
This technical hurdle is less famous than the catchphrase that almost didn't happen.
The line, of course, is, "I'll be back."
One of the most famous cinematic quotes ever.
And it caused real difficulty. Schwarzenegger struggled to pronounce the contraction "I'll" because of his accent. He preferred to change the line to the much simpler, grammatically cleaner "I will be back."
But Cameron refused.
He insisted on the scripted phrase. Schwarzenegger worked hard to say it as written, and the result is a slightly stiff, almost forced delivery that ironically works perfectly for a machine trying to master human syntax.
A line he would then repeat in countless other films.
Exactly.
The scrappy, resourceful nature of the production persisted right up to the final frame. The chilling final highway scene of Sarah driving through Mexico, that required some guerrilla filmmaking.
Indeed. That final iconic scene where Sarah's driving alone and recording tapes for her son was filmed without any official permits. Cameron and Hurd were driving the beat-up truck themselves when they were confronted by a local police officer.
And what did they do?
To avoid being shut down, they quickly convinced the officer they were just making a UCLA student film. That necessity and resourcefulness defined every stage of the production. They had to fight for every shot.
Before we delve into the initial critical reaction, we have to address the atmosphere that created the film's relentless, anxiety-inducing tension.
The score.
The score provided by composer Brad Fiedel.
Fiedel's score was utterly central to establishing the film's mechanical, horrifying propulsion. He was represented by the Gorfaine-Schwartz agency, and after he sent a cassette to Cameron, he was invited to a screening.
And Gaylan Hurd was initially skeptical.
She was, because Fiedel had primarily worked in television, not features.
But he convinced them with a truly experimental piece that just captured the machine's spirit.
He did. Fiedel described his score as needing to reflect two things at once: a mechanical man and his heartbeat. He achieved this with synthesized sounds, which was still relatively new and edgy for film scoring at the time.
And almost all the music was recorded live.
It was. The simple, repetitive, and haunting Terminator theme was created entirely on a Prophet 10 synthesizer. That's what gives it that distinct metallic tone.
And the rhythm of that theme is what makes it so unnerving. It operates in a time signature that's famously unusual.
It's in the truly unique time signature of 1316. Fiedel arrived at this rhythm completely by accident while experimenting with loops on his sequencer.
An incomplete loop.
An incomplete loop, resulting in a rhythm that felt slightly off-kilter, repetitive, and unsettling. Instead of correcting it, he realized he liked the herky-jerky and propulsive feeling, and he kept it as the film's signature mechanical pulse.
It perfectly conveyed that sense of relentless, unnatural motion.
Perfectly.
There's also an anecdote about a rejected, more traditional score he wrote for one scene.
Yes. Fiedel originally composed a much more conventional, heroic theme for the pivotal scene where Reese and Sarah escape the police station. But Cameron, the ruthless editor, he rejected it.
Why?
He argued that adding a heroic theme would deflate the audience's emotional excitement and break the relentless tension they had so meticulously built up. The film was supposed to feel like a constant chase, and heroic music would betray that core horror element.
Despite all this high-quality and innovative approach, Orion Pictures lacked genuine faith in the film's commercial potential.
That lack of confidence was obvious in their marketing strategy. Orion held only one press screening before the premiere.
Just one.
Just one. However, the film defied those low expectations entirely. The Terminator opened on October 26, 1984, and immediately topped the U.S. box office.
And it stayed at #1 for 2 weeks.
It did. Cameron later reflected that its timing was key. He said it was a big fish in a small pond during the pre-Christmas release period, allowing it to avoid direct competition from massive summer or Christmas blockbusters. It went on to earn $78.3 million worldwide, a gigantic success.
The contemporary critical reception, however, was clearly polarized, which often happens with films that aggressively fuse and challenge genres.
That is absolutely true. On the positive side, reviewers recognized its raw energy. Variety called it a blazing cinematic comic book full of virtuoso movie-making, terrific momentum.
And Time magazine gave it significant prestige.
It did, by including it in its 10 best list for 1984, praising its tech-noir savvy. The UK's monthly film bulletin offered technical praise, highlighting the script, the effects, and Schwarzenegger's perfectly machine-like portrayal.
But the relentless violence and the darker tone alienated a significant number of critics.
It did. Janet Maslin of the New York Times, while acknowledging the film had flair, found the sheer volume of mayhem, the car chases and shootouts, to become dull. The Pittsburgh Press gave it a thoroughly negative review, calling it just another of the films drenched in artsy ugliness.
And the Chicago Tribune called the style schizoid.
Yes, and noted the dialogue felt hokey in places.
And one critique went far beyond simple dissatisfaction. It went into political and philosophical territory.
Yes, the reaction from Scottish author Gilbert Adair was intensely negative and provocative. He called the film repellent to the last degree.
And he escalated that charge.
He did, by claiming the film was imbued with insidious Nazification and possessed an appeal rooted in an unholy compound of fascism, fashion, and fascination. This kind of extreme critique just underscores how polarizing and unsettling the film's cold, technological atmosphere was for some contemporary reviewers.
Despite that early turbulence, retrospective acclaim has overwhelmingly cemented its status as a foundational piece of 1980s cinema.
The change in perception was dramatic. In 1991, Entertainment Weekly gave it an A, declaring it one of the most original films of the 80s. TV Guide gave it 4 stars and argued the original was far superior to its mega-grossing, mega-budgeted sequel, which is enormous praise.
And, of course, the Library of Congress.
Right. Its permanent cultural significance was recognized when the Library of Congress selected it for preservation in the National Film Registry in 2008.
The reason the Terminator had such a massive influence is because it was so much more than its plot. It acted as a thematic crossroads, blending elements from several seemingly disparate genres into something entirely new.
It truly defied easy labels, which is why it confused some critics back in '84. It uses standard science fiction elements, time travel, advanced robotics, but it strongly incorporates the iconography of the slasher film genre.
The T-800 functions exactly like Michael Myers or Jason Voorhees.
An unstoppable, silent, supernatural force relentlessly pursuing its victim.
Exactly.
And Sarah Connor's transformation fits perfectly into that horror framework. It does. She begins as the vulnerable, unsuspecting target, but ultimately she has to find the inner resources to confront and defeat the monster.
placing her squarely in the final girl archetype.
But with a sci-fi twist.
Yeah.
And furthermore, it's widely credited as the originator, or at least the popularizer, of the term tech noir.
Let's expand on that term, tech noir. It seems academics have critiqued its usage.
They have. While popular critics often apply the label to the Terminator and films like Blade Runner, describing it as the blending of dystopian sci-fi with noir fatalism, academic critics like Pauwe Freilich have questioned its utility.
They argue it might be a reductive label.
Right. The objection is that applying this term doesn't actually deepen the genre theory. They ask, are these films a distinct new genre, or are they simply sophisticated, high-quality examples of existing hard science fiction that just happens to be visually bleak?
The critique being that the term oversimplifies the philosophical roots by focusing too much on aesthetic gloom.
Precisely.
But whether you call it tech noir or sophisticated sci-fi, the time travel element itself introduces one of the most profound paradoxes in modern science fiction.
This is the predestination paradox, sometimes called the bootstrap paradox, and it's what gives the film its intellectual weight.
The core of it being that Kyle Reese travels back in time to protect Sarah Connor.
And in doing so, he impregnates her, becoming the father of John Connor. Therefore, John only exists because Reese was sent back. And Reese was only sent back because John existed in the future to give the order.
It's the ultimate closed loop. The hero of the future is the direct result of the attempt to save the past.
It is a self-fulfilling prophecy, and its thematic weight is immense. It raises the fundamental question that differentiates this film from nearly all prior time travel narratives.
Most stories, like Back to the Future, focus on the possibility of changing the past.
Right, but the Terminator, by using the bootstrap paradox, suggests that actions taken in the past merely fulfill the existing future. It asks, is humanity doomed to follow a predetermined tragic path, even in its acts of heroic intervention? This single concept just fundamentally reshaped how sci-fi writers approach temporal causality.
Beyond the concepts of time and fate, the film also offered a rich opportunity for psychoanalytic reading, specifically regarding the man-machine motif and masculinity.
Yes, psychoanalyst Darian Leader offered a powerful interpretation. He viewed the Terminator as a perfect example of cinema dealing with anxieties around modern masculinity.
His argument being that to be a man requires more than to have the biological body of a male.
Something else must be added to it. The film embodies this through the T-800, the machine covered in tissue, suggesting masculinity often relies on having a body plus something symbolic, something which is not ultimately human, be it a badge, a uniform, or in this case, the metal endoskeleton.
And perhaps the most relevant and lasting legacy today is its commentary on artificial intelligence.
The existential threat, absolutely. The film was seminal in exploring the potential dangers of unchecked AI dominance, Skynet becoming self-aware and autonomously launching global nuclear war.
Judgment Day.
Judgment Day. It has resonated deeply with public fears ever since. The image of the Terminator robot, that unstoppable, emotionless machine acting purely on cold logic to exterminate humanity, has become the prevalent visual representation of AI risk in public and even scientific discourse.
It's the default chilling warning.
It is. It's about the consequences of technological evolution moving beyond human control.
This brings us to the unavoidable legal shadows that complicated the film's unique creation myth. The famous plagiarism controversy involving writer Harlan Ellison.
Harlan Ellison, a highly respected and prolific sci-fi writer, initiated a legal battle. He claimed that the Terminator screenplay borrowed heavily from his 1964 short story, Soldier from Tomorrow, and a related episode of The Outer Limits he wrote, also titled Soldier.
The similarities focused on a soldier from the future being sent back in time to fight a war in the present.
Yes. And Ellison was actually quoted as saying he loved the movie, was just blown away by it, but he still firmly believed it was a ripoff of his earlier work.
So how did the studio choose to resolve this high-stakes confrontation?
Orion Pictures settled the case in 1986. Ellison received an undisclosed but substantial amount of money, and in exchange, an acknowledgement credit was added to later prints of the film.
Stating that Cameron acknowledged the works of Harlan Ellison.
Right. And while some accounts sometimes confuse the issue with Ellison's other story, Demon with a Glass Hand, Ellison himself clarified the core of the controversy focused specifically on Soldier.
What needs emphasizing here is the enormous vulnerability of the filmmakers and the studio at that early stage. Cameron was reportedly furious about the settlement.
He was fiercely against it. He stated that he was essentially forced to agree by Orion Pictures because the studio simply could not afford the financial risk of losing a major infringement lawsuit.
They were a small studio.
A small studio, and if they lost, the damages could have sunk the company or certainly bankrupted Cameron. He was also subjected to a gag order. His strong objection just highlights the high stakes involved in protecting the narrative of the film's originality. Years later, he insisted that while he had no choice but to agree with the settlement at the time, his version of the creation myth was the absolute truth.
Moving from the critical and legal controversies to the undeniable permanent recognition the film achieved. The Terminator's cultural significance has only deepened over time.
The film quickly gained the respect of the genre world. It swept the science fiction category at the Saturn Awards, winning 3 major prizes: Best Science Fiction Film, Best Makeup for Stan Winston's incredible work,
And Best Writing.
More importantly, in 2008, the film received the highest recognition an American film can achieve.
Selected for preservation in the United States National Film Registry by the Library of Congress. Deemed culturally, historically, or aesthetically significant.
That's the one.
The American Film Institute also cemented the film's permanent place in cinema history across several of their lists.
They did. The AFI ranked the film 42nd on its 100 Years, 100 Thrills list, recognizing it as one of America's most exciting films. The Terminator character himself was named the 22nd greatest movie villain of all time.
Shoulder to shoulder with established horror and crime icons.
Exactly. And of course, that line that almost changed, "I'll be back," was voted the 37th greatest movie, quote, by the AFI. It just shows its profound ability to stick in the cultural consciousness.
Ultimately, the film served its purpose by solidifying Schwarzenegger's path to superstardom and launching Cameron's career as a dominant director.
Schwarzenegger's biographer, Lawrence Leamer, called The Terminator an influential film affecting a whole generation of darkly hued science fiction, and it was one of Arnold's best performances.
And for Cameron.
For Cameron, the film immediately established him as a master of tight, kinetic action, special effects integration, and quasi-mythic narrative. It provided the blueprint for his subsequent, even larger blockbusters. Empire magazine included it in its 2008 list of the 500 greatest movies of all time. The sheer volume of recognition for a $6.4 million film is just staggering.
And that initial, improbable success was bound to spawn a massive global franchise that continues to redefine itself today.
The original film's success led to 5 sequels, starting with the mega-budgeted Terminator 2. Judgment Day in 1991, followed by Rise of the Machines, Salvation Genesis, and the 2019 film Terminator: Dark Fate.
And it's noteworthy that while Schwarzenegger returned for most of them, Cameron and Linda Hamilton made a huge statement by only returning for T2 and Dark Fate.
They did. Dark Fate in particular was positioned as a direct sequel to T2, effectively choosing to ignore the events of the intervening films. It demonstrates the primacy of Cameron's vision.
And the franchise extends well beyond the big screen.
Oh yeah. It expanded into a television series, Terminator, the Sarah Connor Chronicles, which aired from 2008 to 2009 and gained a devoted following.
And that series explicitly continued the narrative after Terminator 2.
It did, deepening the mythos of Sarah Connor's continuing struggle. And then there's the merchandise. 2 different novelizations, a massive number of comic books, including some interesting crossovers like Superman versus the Terminator and numerous video games. The sheer breadth of it all just demonstrates how a modest, gritty horror action film captured the public imagination and established a new foundation for high-concept science fiction storytelling.
So we have meticulously examined how this film, born from a fever dream, executed on a shoestring budget with an uncertain cast and crew, fundamentally changed the sci-fi action landscape. It launched mega careers, drove innovation in practical special effects, and through its relentless, emotionless antagonist, provided the prevalent visual representation of AI risk that we still use in discourse today.
And that technological dread brings us back to the fundamental thematic question that the film, thanks to the elegant use of the bootstrap paradox, left hanging for the audience. The ultimate tension in the film isn't merely between man and machine, or even between hero and villain. It is the tension between fate and free will.
Right.
Given that John Connor must exist to send Reese back to ensure his own existence, the question remains, is humanity truly doomed to follow the catastrophic path Skynet laid out, trapped in a deterministic loop? Or does Sarah's final journey, pregnant and recording tapes for her son as she drives into the looming storm, represent a conscious, defiant choice for a new path forward, even if that path is paved with destiny?
Something to ponder next time you hear that ominous, slightly off-kilter 1316 beat.
Indeed.
Thanks for listening.